Okay, so this preset was based on a request that came in a few days ago. Someone was asking, hey, can you put together a preset that's kind of going after some of those Randy Rhoads tones? And the person was asking about the live tones that were on the tribute album. And so that was kind of my starting point. And from there, I just kind of got in and started researching and trying things on the Quad Cortex. And for the most part, I was able just kind of to stick to the general equipment that Randy Rhoads was using at the time. Obviously, if you look at his tone at the time, it's that kind of really mid-forward Marshall tone. It's wrapped up in that same time period, where Van Halen, he was doing similar things to Van Halen, where he was, using Marshall super leads. I think he was using a Variac. There's a lot of similarities in how they're approaching the tones. Obviously, the end tones sound different because they're different players, but there's a lot of similarities in the kind of the bass tone. And then he was adding in a few things on top of that. So what I've done here is I've tried to create some of those tones here in a few different ways. And it is all based around starting with a Brit Plexi 100. So kind of super lead 100 watt, the bright channel, and I'm running that into two different Marshall 4x12s. One is the GB7589, and the other is the TV69. So I'm running through two cabs because to my ears, it kind of makes the tone sound bigger, and it kind of gives you that kind of arena rock tone running it through the two. And I'm just splitting it, a regular normal split, mixing them back in, not panning them really at all, just kind of trying to get the bigger sound out of the amp. On the front end, I've got a few things, but for this first tone, really all I'm doing is doing a graphic EQ. So Randy used an MXR graphic EQ, and what I'm doing is mimicking that and using the settings from what I've seen in terms of really pushing the low mids in his tone. So it's interesting because it's a different take as you would get of, say, someone who's using a two screamer, where that push is going to be more around 1K. You get into the Trevor Rabin stuff, that's pushing more of like a 2K tone. Here he's pushing really high on the 500 hertz, and then some of the mid tones around it. So it's really shaping that low mid push on the front end. And then I'm running that into a chief chorus here. I'm using the CE1 mode, and not a super high mix, keeping the rate pretty low, the depth moderate. Again, I think from what I've read, he would use the NMXR chorus, but he would use it pretty lightly, just trying to fill in the tone. And that was mostly for live, I think. And because in the studio, he was known to do a lot of double tracking, and we'll get into that in a second. But for this kind of chorusy live tone, I'm using this, trying to set it pretty low. You can still hear that there's a chorus on it, but I've kept it as subtle as I could, but still have it make effect. And then the back end, I'm using a hall reverb. Again, just trying to get that big kind of stadium reverb kind of feel to it. So this basic tone here with the EQ and the chorus, and then running to the amp and just a reverb on the end, sounds like this. So big, thick, again, that really low mid push, I think it sounds pretty good. So one of the other pieces he was known to use quite a lot is a MXR distortion pedal. And so what I've done there is I went out and I found a capture of an MXR distortion pedal, and I found one that I thought is kind of using the pedal the same way that he did. A lot of times what he was doing, from what I've read, is not necessarily using for a lot more distortion, but using it as a front-end boost into his amp. So not a lot of his distortion, a lot of gain on it to push the volume. Again, a lot of these kind of 80s tones, what they were doing is they were using these amps and they were really just pushing them as hard as they could on the front end. They were pushing the volume, they were using, super distortion kind of pickups. they were pushing, as much level into the front of the amp to get as much gain as they could. And this is kind of in the early days before there was a lot of kind of the modifications of the amps to get higher gain out of them. So a lot of this was really just pushing the front end. And so I thought this capture did pretty well here. And so the difference is this. So here's, again, the amp on its own. And just so you know, the settings of the amp, we're only got the gain out of 5. So you could push the gain more on this amp if you wanted to, if you cranked it all the way up. It really doesn't make that much of a difference. I like it a little lower because I think you get a little more clarity. And then when you kick it with the MXR, and really I'm just pushing the volume a little bit, again, just trying to kick the front of that amp more. So again, it's just kind of filling it in, pushing the front of that amp, giving it kind of a bigger tone. And to that, we can add in a tape delay. And I'm using, again, not a lot of delay time, about 350, so nothing super high. Pushing the wow a little bit, keeping the drive about halfway, not too much flutter, and just trying to add some kind of ambience for more of a lead tone. So that's the tones kind of with the chorus pedal. I wanted to try something different in terms of, if you listen to the studio tones, like I said, he was known for doing a lot of double tracking. And so what I ended up doing was engaging a doubler. And I put it down here kind of after the cabs, before the ambient effects. I've got the spread really low, just 3 milliseconds, so not tons of spread. You could raise that up a little bit if you wanted to. But the idea here is to just, instead of using the chorus pedal, let's try using the doubler. So here it is with the chorus pedal. If we use the doubler instead, it sounds like this. And of course, the doubler is a stereo effect. So to get full kind of experience of this, you need to be headphones or using monitors or something where you can hear that stereo spread, because the way the doubler works is the signal that's going to the right channel is getting a very short delay on it, that 3 millisecond delay. That's how it gets the spread. And you get kind of the feeling that there's 2 guitars. We add the MXR to that. And then kind of that lead delay. So that's using the Plexi tone model. And I do think that that sounds the most like what he was using. But I also tried out a couple of the other Marshall models, and I really liked how the 2203 was sounding. And you can see, pushing a little more gain, same kind of thing, keeping the bass back, pushing the mids, pushing some trebles and presence. And where the plexi sounds like this, the 2203 sounds like this. And when you go with a lead, meaning you're giving the MXR, you're engaging the doubler, you're engaging the delay. I mean, I really prefer how the 2203 sounds. I think maybe the plexi model sounds more like Randy, but I'm digging the 2203 personally. So I think you could use them interchangeably. There's a slightly different tone, but you know, if you go to the 2203 and you crank the gain on that, so as always, I'll make this preset available on my Cortex Cloud account. The link for that's in the description. Feel free to grab it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.